Avatarana Karana He Ravi Nandana Bandana Kandana He Sharanagata Kinkara Beta Mane Guru Deva Daya Kara Dina Jane Riddhi Kandara Tamasa Bhashkara He Tumi Vishnu Prajapati Shankara He Para Brahma Parat Para Veda Bane Guru Deva Daya Kara Dina Jane
Om Brahmanandam Paramasukram Kevalam Gyanamurtim Dvandvaititam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvamashadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Triguna Rahitam Sadgurum Tan Namami Om Shantihi 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 Om Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman Tamatmastam Ye Nupashanti Diraha Tesham Shanti Sasvati Netaresham Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. We offer our eternal obeisances to the Supreme Being, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, who is beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, and all phases of opposites. We recognize that one who is the only witness to the changing phenomena of this universe. May we through that grace go beyond darkness and delusion and realize the truth in this very life. That one, the eternal among non-eternal things, the intelligence of the most intelligent ones, who, though ever one, nevertheless fulfills the desires of the many. That one, the wise realize, is dwelling in their very self. To them belong peace and to none else. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the teachings, or with the world. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Namaste, everyone. Welcome to SRV Hawaii, here on the Big Island. And we meet for our third in a series of classes on Advaita Vedanta. Call it Advaita Yoga, or call it, as you will, what Gaudapada named it in his time, which is called the non-touch yoga, or Asparsha Yoga. And we have been looking into that particular subtle, non-dual state of mind, or of no mind, if you'd rather put it that way, for some 6 hours now, and we're about ready to launch into 3 more. And we will have further classes over the next 2 Sundays, live streamed. Today we've just returned from our talk at the New Thought Church on the Kona side of this island, where we presented the message called Avatar as Exemplar, not Savior. So we were looking into the great sayings of the avatars, as we have done here on live streaming class before, called the Advaita of the Avatars, and a series of classes that's now available on our website. And we welcome all those who are joining us on live streaming. We feel very fortunate and have gratitude to Advaita Academy for allowing us to have this space and use this time wisely. That is Nama, Rupa, Desha, Kala, and Namitta. name, form, causality, time and space. They're all considered to be false superimpositions over reality and concepts in our mind. But nevertheless, we can use them in a positive way. So that's what I mean. We're using this space and this time in a positive way in order to transmit the teachings of Advaita Vedanta to those who are interested in joining us live, those who are here in the room at the ashram here in Honaka'a, and also those of a general interest, like those we spoke today at the New Thought Church. And we return here to the ashram to look into the non-touch yoga where we left off last time. And as you remember, that was with this particular chart. And I have actually looked up the actual slokas in Gaudapada's Karika that have to do with this chart. You remember, as a basic rundown of this chart, we left it last time, I've titled it The Province of the Enlightened. And it subtitled The Three Types of Knowledge Samadhis in Advaita Vedanta. We know in yoga there's two, as I think I mentioned last week. There's the Savitarka, Savichara, and Nirvitarka, Nirvichara couples of knowledge samadhis. Basically, they have to do with having your first glimpse of all that is within you. That is this whole host of knowledge that has turned into objects out here, but on the inside is still in a non-objective way, is much like these first two yogas of the non-dual Advaita here. You can see where it says there, the first Laukika Gyan is knowledge when external objects are believed to exist. So here we are in the realm of external objects, and we're looking at trees, and we're looking at sugar cane. You know, we're in Hawaii if we say that. And we're looking at the ocean outside our window, out of our view of this ashram. And we're looking at books on the shelf that have to do with spiritual topics. We're looking at all sorts of different objects. So we're here where those things exist, in relativity, in duality, however you want to put it. But that also is a kind of samadhi if one sees it that way. That is, if one knows that all of those objects aforementioned and all the other objects that we take in, as well as our very own physical bodies, are made of intelligence, intelligent particles as we'd say, then that's a kind of samadhi that you're walking around in all the time. And of course you refer to the seers and the scriptures to underlie, support, and further deepen the knowledge that you're in. It's a kind of a knowledge samadhi. He calls it Laukika Gyan, as you see by the chart that you're seeing now on the camera, and also Shuddha Laukika Gyan. It becomes Shuddha, pure, when you see that those very same objects outside of you have come from inside of you. That is, as Swami Vivekananda once said, you can destroy the clay cup, but you can never destroy the thought, clay cup. I had someone write me recently a good question about how he can trace his negative thoughts in his mind and trace them back to their origin and destroy it. And I told him, neither thought nor origin can be destroyed. Let me give you the non-dual version of the answer first. Nothing is destroyed. Everything is existing at all times. It's just a matter of whether it manifests itself or it's in an unmanifested state. And that's basically what Gaudapada is talking about here. When you see with your senses outwardly all of these things existing, yet you know that those things have a connection to your inner self, that is through the mind and through the word, then you can call yourself to be in that first samadhi, Laukika Gyan. It's a kind of knowledge samadhi you're walking around in. The only way that you could probably understand that is to compare it with your friend or your neighbor who are not in that kind of mindset. They don't know yet or have any inkling or any idea that the tree is just a projection of their own thought. They're thinking of the tree as something that nature produced, or they're thinking of the tree as something that exists independently of Brahman, independently of you, and independent of the mind. And so that's all called separation. See, there's a whole host of separations there which a person has to deal with if one is interested in, well, let's just say the word, it's rather cliche, oneness. Because basically Advaita means oneness. It can be used in a cliche way if you don't understand the inner dynamics of what connects you to that thing. You can just say, oh, I'm one with everything, and I'm stardust, and all the lyrics out of the early songs in the 60s that we were raised on here in the West, but basically you haven't ascertained the inner dynamics of the thing, what makes it one with you. And actually, if you take it to deeper levels of samadhi, like he says here on this chart, which is called lokatara gyan, where neither the object nor its perception exists, it just becomes completely melded, merged in you, back in your own true nature. And there are no objects anymore. There's just the subject, the eternal subject. Then you're finding this different and higher kind of samadhi, which was also used by Patanjali in his Raja Yoga, in that yoga system called Ashtanga, or eight-limbed. That's a very high samadhi called unseeded. That is, it has no seeds in it. Seeds that will produce thoughts, seeds that will produce energy, seeds that will produce objects. The seeds have been burnt. So now you're in a state where there is no object, there is no energy, and there is no thought. Beyond mind, energy, and thought, and matter, is this Atman. It is anterior to life and mind. That's how the Mundaka Upanishad says it. So here's Mandukya Upanishad, and there's a quote from Mundaka Upanishad. Don't get the two confused, because it's easy to do. So this is a little bit of a rerun of this chart, because a few of my students actually said, that went by too fast last week. I'd like to look at that again. So it actually, I'm putting it pretty simply here, and then I'm also trying to make it a sort of hands-on teaching, so that you know that when you're aware of outer objects, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are dual. You see, you're just aware of duality. Your perception is aware of duality, and the object seems separate from you. But if you keep the knowledge that you have gleaned from the teachings, from the Dharma, and from your meditations, and from your teachers, then you'll always keep that connection in mind, so that you walking out of the house one day, as compared to your neighbor walking out of your house one day, are two different completely different beings. You see what I'm saying? One is walking out just saying, all of that is separate from me, and I have to somehow go out and go into it. How does he put it here? All entities are by nature calm and unoriginated from the very outset. They're of the nature of nirvana itself. But there is indeed no self-confidence in those who move about believing in an illusory world of differences. That's your so-called neighbor walking out without having this knowledge that he's connected into all of this. Those who hold to this doctrine of separation descend into a world fraught with differences. They are traditionally known as nervous wrecks. Probably the first time the phrase was ever used, back there in 500, 600 AD, you see, when Gaudapada was living. So I hope then we understand the first samadhi. First knowledge samadhi is kind of an objective samadhi. The objects are there, you're perceiving them, but don't let that cause you to think that you've forgotten the connection between the object and yourself. So there's a certain peace and there's a certain bliss in that, isn't there? If you think everything is separate from you and everything is different, then you enter a world that's fraught with fear. Does it sound familiar? Because that's what people are living in. That kind of fear of separation. They fear each other, they fear nature, they fear other countries. That kind of fear grows, you see, and it turns into violent actions, turns into all sorts of transgressions against the Dharma. Even against moral codes and ethicals, what to speak of the Dharma. So there is a certain bliss, a certain peace involved with knowing that all of that's come from you. We can put it that simply, okay? That is Laukika Gyan. This is the first samadhi of knowledge in the Advaita Vedanta system. Now, that second one we mentioned is Shuddha Laukika Gyan. Shuddha means pure. There is what is pure, there is what is mixed, and there is what is impure. That's called Shuddha, and Ashuddha. If you know those three terms, in Vedanta, then you can make a lot of ground in your understanding of the teachings when you read them. Basically, they're not talking again about morals and ethics, like whether I'm sinful or whether I'm virtuous or whether I've been a bad boy or whether I've been a good boy. That's not what they're talking about. When they say pure, impure, and mixed pure, impure, they mean how close it is to my Atman, or how far away has it gotten from my Atman. You see, things that are farthest away become impure, like nature. They've turned into objects. Impure should not cast the aspersion of being gross or dirty, filthy or something, you see, or non-virtuous, sinful. It should convey the idea in Vedanta that it's far-flung. That's a nice term. It's gotten far-flung. It's very far away from the word, which is the origin of everything. So therefore, there it is, Ashuddha. So when you make the connection to the thing, that it's far-flung from your very self, then you can start saying it might be Shuddha. It might even start to look Shuddha, more pure, because I've made the connection to it. But if I haven't made that connection to it, even the very fear of separation makes it impure, you see. Then it has no connection with me whatsoever. And you're living in a world of, how did he put it? In an illusory world of differences. Maybe none of you listening to me understand this right now, because you've long ago gotten over it. See, maybe I'm just talking to a brick wall here. But I want to make sure that you understand this in terms of the Advaita Vedanta that we're talking about right now, that there is a provision for it in Advaita Vedanta, just like there is in Patanjali's yoga, just like there is in Tantra and Buddhism and so forth. There is a provision for these levels of consciousness. So if you know them, it's not only you here that's concerned, it's those you run into, those you bump up against, those who you commune with. So you can ascertain their state. Oh, I see you don't know there's a connection yet, like I was saying at New Thought Church today, between smell and earth and taste and water and fire and sight and touch and air and hearing and sound. You see, I don't see a connection there yet. So when you see that connection, all of a sudden things become closer to you. They're not so far flung, are they? So therefore they're purer. Get the idea then? Then what's the most pure of all, you see? Because when you have knowledge of an object, but then the object disappears, it's almost like dreaming or deep sleep, isn't it? That's why I put this chart up, which we will get to. The A, U, and M of Om is pretty much connected to your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep state. So they want you to put this together with your actual experiences in the body on earth. You have to master the A of Om. You have to master the U of Om. You have to master the M of Om. And know that they go with Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. There's a trinity there, you see. There's a triputi there. There's a trio there. There's a triplet there. And connect all of those up, you see, because that's the grounds for even closer and closer samadhi. You see, deeper and deeper samadhi, where the object begins to disappear, like in deep sleep, but you still have knowledge of it. It's still inside of you. And hopefully you'll have that experience of deep sleep consciously one time, which is why you're practicing meditation, so that you will have it consciously. If you had it consciously in meditation, then your deep sleep state would transform and you would master it. You would know what's going on there. The third, Lokatara Gyan, again in the review of this chart, is, he says here, knowledge when neither objects nor their perceptions exist, leading the seer to omniscience. So that gets beyond the A, U, M of Om and gets into Turiya. That's called the fourth. They didn't want to give that a name to limit it, so they just called it Turiya, the fourth. That's the fourth state of your consciousness, which transcends A, U, M. It's beyond the word. Or, if you want, it's where I and my Father are one. Or the Word was God. That kind of oneness. So all of this is put in perspective of you and the object, isn't it? The subject and the object. You are not the object, you are the eternal subject. But If you know that all objects have come out of the eternal subject and you have still a connection with them, then you can always stay in a sort of samadhi, or in a sort of balanced condition, you see. That's why he says here, the rare condition of knowing Brahman is spoken of as naturally calm and controlled, because one's own nature is calm and controlled. Know this then and attain to calmness and control. When you come to Vedanta, or if you come to higher level of consciousness, you're not trying to get calm. You're not trying to control yourself. It's not like sama and dhamma. It's the inner peace and self-control. You already are calm and controlled by your very nature. That's the beauty of Advaita Vedanta that everyone's attracted to. Unfortunate, though, that most people who are attracted to it try and jump to it before they've even understood the dynamics of it. They try and make themselves perfect before they understand how to become perfect. That is, they're going to have to take the steps in order to convince themselves. Otherwise, there's always going to be some doubt, or, read my stotram, some fear, some sense of difference between you and that thing, that object, that person, that body, that host of bodies, that other race, that other culture, that other world, that other dimension. Should I fear my ancestors? Fear the devils? Fear the angels? Fear the asuras? Fear the demigods? Fear the deities? Or should I realize that they all exist inside of me? And then we can all get along just fine, thank you very much. They are harmonized in me. I am that is in me. And that's living in a state of calm and controlled, naturally calm and controlled mind. See? So he says the same thing below, doesn't he? All entities are by nature calm and unoriginated from their very outset. They are the nature of nirvana. You're looking for nirvana here and there, you think it's beyond objects. Those very objects are existing in nirvana. Why? Because you are in nirvana and those things have come out of you. You see? Why should you distance them further? You'll just create a remedy without a disease without a remedy, see? Without a cure. As you fling them further away from your true nature. You're practicing the yoga of oneness now. Unfortunately, what's going around nowadays in this world is the yoga of apathy. The yoga of disinterest. So, how he puts it then, if we want to conclude this chart for a second time, is you need to know what's fit to be abandoned. You need to know what's fit to be secured, what's fit to be known, and what's specifically fit to be known. The specifically fit to be known is Brahman, which is your true nature, your own Atman. And that's paramount. That's first and foremost. Know thyself, or know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Those kinds of sayings that we hear repeated are paramount. But if you start from the lowest stage, first you ought to know what's fit to be abandoned. Lust, anger, greed, envy, jealousy, fear, pride, pride of caste, pride of lineage, shame, fear, doubt. On and on goes the list, you see. And if you want to put it very simply, the way Gaudapada is putting it here, what's fit to be abandoned is the sense of separation. Then you know the oneness of everything, the interconnectedness of all things. To know the interconnectedness of all things brings you to that pinnacle that Buddha reached in his meditation under the bo tree, where he could then distance himself from everything that was unreal. Then he could make the separation from nature, from all things with form, so he could have the highest Lokatara Gyan, Samadhi. Nirvana, as it's called here. So know what's fit to be abandoned and stay on vigil with it. What's fit to be known? You could say that's going to be the Dharma. You see, those teachings which come to you via your illumined parents, if you had such things, If you didn't have those, then those preceptors, acharyas, and gurus, and teachers that came to you somewhere in your life, which taught you the Dharma. And that's what's fit to be known. Because that will, without a doubt, get rid of all doubt, beyond fear. And then what is fit to be secured is the realization of the Dharma via your sadhana, your spiritual practice. You can't just hear the Dharma and then assume or conclude that I'm free. You have to hear the Dharma and you have to put it into practice and bring it full circle. Practice it, realize it, here in this very life. Then you will know what's specifically fit to be known. It will be revealed unto you. So just like that, in the 4 stages, Gaudapada puts it in juxtaposition to the 3 kinds of knowledge samadhis. I hope that's clear and a good review now from last week, because, and actually before we exit that particular teaching, I will read you the actual slokas from Gaudapada's Karika. The rare condition of the knowers of Brahman is spoken of as naturally calm and controlled, owing to one's own nature being calm and controlled. Know this then and attain to calmness and control. For a calm and controlled one, the dual with its objects and perceptions is looked on as practical. The dual without its objects, but with its perceptions intact, is looked upon as pure and practical. But the dual without its objects and without its perceptions is traditionally known as the super-practical. Knowledge, the object of the knowledge, and particularly the knowable, these 3 are always proclaimed by the enlightened. Knowledge and the threefold objects of knowledge become known gradually or in order. Omniscience of its Lord accrues here on all sides to the one of illumined intellect. What is fit to be abandoned, what is fit to be known, and what is fit to be secured, and what is fit to be made perfect are to be known by the agrayana. Of these, of the 3, excluding that fit to be particularly known, perception is said to take place. So that kind of objective perception disappears when you understand or when you have communion with that which is specifically fit to be known. That's your own self. All entities by nature are well ascertained to be Adi-Buddhas, ever enlightened. One who has self-sufficiency in this way is said to be immortal. All entities indeed are calm from the very outset, unoriginated, and very blissful, of the nature of nirvana itself. They are always the same and non-different. Their being is unoriginated, equal, and self-confident. But there is indeed no self-consciousness in the case of those who move about believing in an illusory world of differences. Those who hold the doctrine of separateness descend into a world fraught with differences. They are traditionally known as nervous wrecks and are very pitiable. Fully opposite are those who establish themselves in the truth of non-origination. For they possess the highest and fullest knowledge in the world. The world, however, does not delve into it, even upon seeing them. So, back to the topic today at the church, at the New Thought Church, about the avatar being an exemplar, not just a savior. If we take the great beings as just saviors, then we rob ourselves of the ability to become enlightened like they are. And they are waiting for us to step up to that state of the agrayana, is the word used here. It's like the arhat, or like the illumined soul, the jivan mukta or the bodhisattva. That level of understanding awaits all beings, and what they need to do is, according to Gaudapada's simple description, is to realize that all beings here are pure and perfect. Everything is unoriginated. It doesn't begin, have a middle and end. It doesn't come, stay, and go. See? Coming and going is all pure nonsense, as Vivekananda said. Where will the soul come from when all of space is in the soul? And at what time will it come and go when all time is in the soul? That's why you can harp again and again on this teaching of Kingdom of Heaven is within you, Kingdom of Heaven is within you. Take unto yourself what is the Lord's, because that is what's pure and perfect. That's the highest wisdom samadhi, and it leads to bliss samadhi, and eventually the bliss samadhi will lead to an egoless samadhi or formless samadhi, asampragyata or nirvikalpa, what Buddha called nirvana. So those are all well set up in the scripture with words very poetic and very convincing. That's a quote right out of the Upanishads. With words very poetic and words very convincing, those kinds of teachings are key or core to the matter of your spiritual life. Now, so that we understand a little better the precept of non-origination, I brought again this chart on what's called a parinama, non-transformation. And I was going to put it together with this chart on the Vedantic and conventional views of birth and death. Let's look first at the chart on non-transformation, as this is a gift of a little work on my part, but really taken from the writings in the letters of Swami Vivekananda. He said, somewhere around 1893, a kind of scientific Advaitism has been spreading throughout Europe ever since the theory of the conservation of energy was discovered. But all that is parinama, evolution by real modification, as contrasted to aparinama, progressive manifestation by unreal superimposition. Now that's quite a mouthful right now. And it is basically that the way the West looks at things is via transformation, that there's change going on and the change is actual. Evolution by real modification. That is, something gets created out of nothing, then when it's in the realm of existence, it begins to change, it begins to grow, and that growth and that change is considered real. Real modification. There are real modifications going on there, but that's never how the seer of India looked at things. Always looked at it as if it were a show, if it was a play, as if it were a dance, as if it were a dream. He goes on to say that Ravanuja's theory is that the bound soul has its perfections involved, and when this perfection occurs, it becomes free. So he's talking about modification, isn't he? All of these imperfections in you are getting made perfect over time by some sort of transformation process you're going through. But the Enlightened declares that involution and evolution take place only in show. Both processes are in Maya, and so are apparent only. This is how he tried to explain to us who were, at the time in 1893, caught between the press of seven-day creation theory and the evolutionary theory. Between a rock and a hard place, as my teacher used to say. We needed a way out, and that way out was the truth of aparinama, non-transformation. It's really very much the same thing, if not exactly the same thing, that Gaudapada is talking about here when he calls it non-origination. You cannot produce something whose nature is to be unproduced. What you're actually doing is calling something from its unproduced nature into form, aren't you? But when you call it into form, is it actually becoming the form? Is it a real modification, or is it just an appearance? Is it taking on a form, but it's never changing its true nature in its underlying essence? See? So that's the idea of what he calls false superimposition. It's very big in Advaita. Vivarta is the word. It's one of the earliest words I ever learned in my Vedantic studies. And I learned another word along with it called adhyasa. This is sort of, and adhyaropa and apavada, how things get covered by Maya to make them look other than what they are. That is, their essence is always unproduced. Didn't we just say that the object is outside of you? When it is, it's impure. And then when the object is closer to you in your mind, then it becomes more like formless. See, now you have the thought of the object but not the real object, and then when the object goes completely inside and loses its form, then it becomes a part of the formless nature. It's returning to its unproduced state, and you have the ability as a meditator to do that. As I was telling the people at the New Thought Church today, you call it all back. You see, if somebody insults you, you say, take it back. So if nature insults you with birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death, fear, doubt, destruction, then you say, take it back to your mind, and it begins to take it back. Takes it back in dream state, and it takes it back in deep sleep state. You're doing that every 24 hours. Now sit in meditation one day and take it back consciously. Because you projected it, you can take it back. And this all begins to show you that everything came out of the mind. It all came out of the mind. All objects are manifestations of your thought. And this all of a sudden puts you at odds and down a different path than people who are believing in creation theory. Oh, that I can get something out of nothing. That somehow out of dust a soul was produced. It has to be taken symbolically at best. Can't be taken literally because it's not sensible and it's not practical. You're going to be one of those people that turns into a nervous wreck if you follow such a world of differences. What you're looking for is that innate connection, that intrinsic connection of yourself with the object, so that you know for sure that that was my responsibility. That was not God's responsibility. That was not devil's responsibility. It was not nature's responsibility. It was my own mind's responsibility. I'm at fault. I'm to blame, or I'm to praise. If my world is a good one, and I'm seeing everything arightly, and my mind is sattvic, then I'm to praise. I don't praise God for that, nor blame devil for it. So this is closer to the truth of the matter, called non-duality, and that word, parinama, pegs it, or a word like ajativada, non-origination, pegs it close to you, right to your heart. See. Now, both processes are in Maya then, these processes of change. They're taking place somewhere else, sort of like in your dream. Gaudapada used to say, a runner runs a race in a dream, but does he go anywhere? Does he see scenery go by? Does he get exercise? He wakes up in his own bed, the dream is all taking place in Maya somewhere, you see. It never took place in reality, did it? It was all a projection. Well, that dream happens to be dream number 2, your waking state. If those of you who love Ramana Maharshi and his teachings, he teaches the exact same thing. Dream number 1 and dream number 2. In other words, he got that from Gaudapada. Gaudapada got it from Vashishta, and Vashishta got it from Krishna. And it went all the way back to souls who knew the nature of reality from the very get-go. They knew that it was all a projection, all a dream, and that their self never went anywhere. Magnificent to self, everywhere at once, unmoving, untouched. It's the non-touch yoga. See, coming at us again, millennia later. Well, here's a few examples. This one I just mentioned. Here's Gaudapada's own quote. All happenings take place in relativity. Taking place in relativity resemble the activities of a man running a race in a dream. Nothing actually transpires. Scenery, movements, race, dream, all are unreal or apparent only. The dreamer alone is real, but he must awaken to realize this. So he must distance himself from that projection that's going on in his mind and see himself as witness. Krishna puts it this way: the unreal has no existence. The real never ceases to be. The truth about both has been realized by the seers. Coming into being and ceasing to be do not take place in the absolute. It is unborn, eternal, constant, and timeless. So, Shankara, Gaudapada, Vashishta, now Krishna, see, all saying the same thing, aren't they? Trying to drive in that idea to our mind about parinama, non-transformation, because we believe so thoroughly in change. See, change is going on all around us, so it's convincing us all the time. I'm getting older. My child is being born. My great-grandfather's passing away. Change, change, change on all sides you see cropping up. But has everyone ever seen the destruction of everything? Has anyone ever seen that? Destruction doesn't exist. Here we are, still existing. Destruction going on all around us, but we still exist. And even when man is gone from the planet, you see, science knows that there's still the universe. So even if you take that perspective, doesn't everything exist at all times? Even if you only take it on the physical level. So who has ever seen the destruction of everything? The mantra, therefore, is everything is, everything is. Aham Atma, I am. I am the self in all. So these are sayings that are always put forth, you see. There's some words for it there in the middle of the circle. Pratyagatman, Antaryami, Kutastha, Sakshi, Atman. Those are all words that have to do with this non-dual level of consciousness. Sakshi is witness, Kutastha is substratum. Antaryami is that inner ruler, immortal and invisible, seated in your heart. It's the Supreme Atman. And there's the word too, right at the apex of it all. Now, the main reason, that's the top half of this chart. The main reason for bringing up this chart is to look at this trickle-down process. And what happens first here is intelligence, knowledge, sattva. Vivekananda says, though knowledge, being a compound, cannot be the absolute itself, it is the nearest approach to it and higher than will or desire. So this is the first thing out the gate, is this particle of intelligence we've been talking about, this vibration of intelligence. It's everywhere. It's at the behest of everything. There are some examples of it. Chidabhasa, pure intelligence reflecting off of reality. Now, if you just change the chart for the viewers for a second, you'll see the principle of Chidabhasa right here. It's also why I brought this chart as an addendum. Basically, it gives us a view of the way the ancient rishis, and Vedanta particularly, looks at this. There's the quote from Vivekananda first. God is not in the universe is in God. This is pretty much a summation of what we were just saying about all these things being inside of you, right? If you're looking for God in the universe, you've got a long time to wait and a long, hard road to hoe before you see anything that even resembles the formless reality here. But if you think the other way and turn it on its ear, just a 2% shift of your consciousness and think, oh, actually, I shouldn't be looking for God in the universe. I should be looking to see that the universe is in God. All of this is in reality. Doesn't it sound like all beings are in nirvana? They're all calm, they're all controlled, they're all perfect, you see? They're all resting in nirvana. Why should I project difference on it? Why shouldn't I just rest there with them? In calm, controlled state, naturally, he says. See, this is what he's trying to communicate to us. So the whole idea of Chidabhasa, which he was just describing in the chart, there you see it trickling down. There is an absolute reality called Brahman, and like rain of grace coming through the Mahashakti is this Buddhi, or this cosmic intelligence. It all pours down and forms into this flow of intelligent particle, this stream of consciousness. You put it in different ways in Buddhism and in Vedanta and in Tantra. So all of that trickling down, down means out, from a very, very refined place, even more refined than the Word, out through the Word, and out into the cosmic intelligence, sometimes called God's mind, Mahat. And that is the beginning of Chiddabhasa. Chiddabhasa means the reflection of consciousness. An example of the reflection of consciousness would be Moses in the burning bush, or Paul seeing Christ on the road to Damascus, or other visions like that. The Vedantas say they're not really seeing a burning bush, they're not really seeing Christ on the road to Damascus, they're seeing an emanation, they're seeing Chiddabhasa, they're seeing a reflection of consciousness cast from a causal or a subtle state into the physical realm. Sort of like a mirage in a desert. It's not really, the water's not really there. So you're getting this reflection of consciousness, and it's all reflected intelligence dancing in front of you. See? Depends on how pure and refined your intelligence is, how you see that emanation. But that's what they say. You won't, in other words, as John said, nobody has ever seen God. Nobody has ever seen God with his eyes. That's Chiddabhasa right there. You don't see God here in the universe. You must see the universe in God. What you'll see is a lot of reflection of God here. It's the reflection of the light of intelligence which spills off of the Om, off of the Word. In order to realize that, as Ramakrishna said, when I first saw Om, I saw everything coming out of it, and I saw everything going back into it. Rising and falling, constantly. No end to it, no beginning to it. He couldn't put a moment of beginning on it, and he couldn't put a time of ending on it. He saw that it was all rising and falling all the time. See? So, down here, where we are, with the body and the five senses, which are imperfect by nature, what we're seeing in nature, like sunlight shining off of leaves, see, reflections, just like that. There's a reflection of that light shining in higher realms too. And the seers are beholding it and they're passing beyond it. See, I see Chiddabhasa is working. I see everything is a reflection of consciousness. It's a reflection of intelligence. But I want to make my way to the source. I want to see that ocean of light. I want to dive into it. I want to measure it. Ha ha. Mm-hmm. Salt doll went to the ocean to try and measure it, you see. You're made of that. You are one of the aspects of Chiddabhasa. We're looking at each other. Reflections of that same Brahman. Don't we say that? See, we're all reflections of that same reality. We are God walking around on two legs. But how many have gotten very close to that kind of insight? See, to really check it out, to really inspect it, to observe it long enough to know how true it is. If anything goes down further than the intelligence, then you see this is where prana, vital energy, where akasha, that is space, different kinds of space, subtle energy, subtle worlds, higher gradated beings, as we see here, and human ego-mind complex begins to form, that is thoughts, conceptualization, visions, imagination, projection, invention, desire. Finally, time and space kicks in. You see 5 subtle elements, 5 gross elements, the physical universe appears, and the flow of all events in time, and basically all the karmas that are going on that tie people in to the process. Those karmas that are going to have to untie in order to get out of that process and free themselves, to be released into moksha or mukti. And finally, human embodiment takes place, the very physical body itself, the 5 senses of knowledge and the 5 senses of action. This is all a trickle-down process called Chiddabhasa. It's one of the very beautiful teachings of Vedanta. And one of the main facets of the teaching is, remember, that's a reflection you're seeing. So please change the chart back because I wasn't going to spend a lot of time on that. That's where this idea of Chiddabhasa here comes, you see. Where is it? Right here. Pure intelligence reflecting reality. It's pure intelligence that's merely reflecting reality. It's not the reality itself yet. You're not seeing the original. You're seeing reflection at a very high level of intelligence. The first compound, remember he said that? Intelligence is the first compound. It's not reality itself, but it's the first thing out the gate. Those particles of intelligence, vibrating with light. There you see some other facets. Anubhav, one of those great words I used today in our talk at New Thought Church, means direct perception of the Atman, direct perception of reality. That happens through this highest intelligence. Paravidya happens there, the sacred wisdom of the non-dual scriptures. We just chanted. That's the sure and certain proof of enlightenment, is the revealed scriptures. So many souls, so many seers and saints and illumined souls, leaving behind a record of their spiritual experiences, right on up to the highest realization. That's the sure and certain proof that this exists. For just an occasional person, you might have some reason to doubt. But hundreds and thousands have come through the gate and said, follow the light. There's the light. See, the light of intelligence. That's the reflection. Follow the reflection. You'll get to the real reflector. See? All of this is reflected by the sun's light. We follow that up to the sun, you see. But where would you follow the sun to? To those billions of suns that are inside of you, shining with the light of knowledge. A sun knows no darkness. And that's much more the case with the sun of in the mind, in the intelligence. Upalabdhi is there, insight via divine remembrance. There's an important word in the realm of intelligence called Smriti Bedu. It means causal memory. We have a causal memory of everything that's back inside of us. We're not just going on this as being proof, but we can trace all of this with inside. That's how we're going to prove to ourselves that all of this exists within us. There's another way of going about it. That's just tracing the origin back to your causal memory, to how many births you've had. And that's done in meditation. It could happen to you in the walk of everyday life that you all of a sudden have a very profound memory from your past lifetime come to you. But moreover, more likely it's going to be when you sit and you meditate deep enough, you'll have these remembrances of events that happened to you, say, for instance, like having your first samadhi, your first conscious samadhi, or having your first conscious birth. Those kinds of things are stored back in the memory. You have to get to them and take them out, you see. A matter of divine remembrance, as he says here, upalabdhi. So if that's the first compound, you can see how powerful it is, what comes rolling off of Brahman, emanating off of that sun of wisdom, like Chittabhasa, and turns into this intelligence with its various facets. His next quote is, the divine first becomes knowledge, then, in the second degree, will. So then will comes about. You can see those listed here. Intuition, abhikya, it's called in Sanskrit. Sense of separate I-ness kicks in, that's called ahamkara. Ahamtavritti, self-arrogating thought. And aparavidya, secular intelligence. So you can see the difference between mind and will and intelligence and knowledge. One is very sattvic, right? One is very rajasic or active. So first degree off of Brahman, first thing out the gate, intelligence. Second thing out the gate, mind and will. Sort of like we were looking back at this Chittabhasa chart, you see, how everything trickles down that way. Now his next quote. And keep in mind what he said at the top of this chart, that parinama is evolution by real modification, and that's how science thinks and so forth. But aparinama is progressive manifestation by unreal superimposition. All of these are reflections, you see. So inside of that context, he says, if it is. This is the evolution. Less and less in the body and more in the mind. Man, the highest form, meaning manas, thought, the animal that thinks, and not the animal that senses only. So he's saying if there is any transformation going on, it's here in the mind. He's not admitting that there is. He's already made a statement that aparinama is the highest truth. There is no transformation going on, but he's giving us this concession. If there is transformation, if you want to give it any room at all in your philosophy, there it is. It's in the mind. Your mind is making it transform. Your mind is dual. Your mind is seeing the objects. Your mind is causing separations. Your mind is forgetting its causal memory, and so forth and so on. So that's something that's up to you, again. It's your responsibility to correct that view that your mind has taken. Right orientation is a part of the Eightfold Path of Buddha, you see. Right orientation. Right perspective, right view, right orientation. Those are extremely important. If the mind gets a little skewed for a while and that time passes, then that skewed mind, that slightly skewed mind, will turn into many errors, one on top of the other, until finally a poor man cannot find himself back out. Holy Mother said, a screw, you take it out, it should go back in the same way, right? But then it goes in skewed, you see. If you ever had that, if you're working with hammers and nails and screws, that screw should just go back in the same way it came out. But no, you see, it's going in a whole different way. So she's talking about man's intelligence. You get a little screw loose in there and try and put it back in, it goes in the wrong way. So very delicate balance there in the mind of a human being. Has to be very carefully mastered, you see, very carefully taken apart and put together. So some of those things there, again, intuition, sense of separate I-ness, self-arrogating thought, that is, thought that thinks that I am the doer, for instance, and secular intelligence as compared to higher intelligence. See, all of those things are properties of the mind, and they're, as it were, a second compound in the reflection process, Chittabhasa process. In other words, you know what I'm saying? They're getting far flung. If we want to go back to an earlier part of this class, you see, the trickle-down process is getting far away from the source. It's not so pure anymore. Now it's mixed pure, and pretty soon it's going to get impure. See? In other words, it's going to get very far flung. It's going to turn into gross objects. Consciousness is actually going to turn into gross objects. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that. One of his favorite views was, in my early spiritual practice and my early spiritual realization, I saw that all this Brahman had become all this. He used to say that. So he had that eye to see. He had that Laukika Gyan. He had that Shuddha Laukika Gyan. You see, he had those higher samadhis which were telling him all of this is connection, but actually if that connection is really followed to the hilt, all of this is nothing else but Brahman, because no transformation has taken place. There can be nothing but Brahman. So the transformations that have taken place in between are unreal. They're non-actual. They're apparent only. They're in show. In the show of Maya, who's a grand master at showmanship, I can tell you. Providing so many things for people to get allured, distracted with. Become cross-eyed with delusion. Make their eye dual instead of single. Well, as it trickles down here, then that's what he said. It's, if there is any evolution going on, any transmigration, any change or transformation going on, it's in the mind. It's all happening in your mind. It's not actually happening in reality. So there you see the products of that. Sense knowledge and sense perception. Something called Vedana, feeling, sensations, coming from contact with objects. Vedana is actually one of the nidanas of Buddhism, one of the links for rebirth. Conditioning. It's From your experiences, you get conditioned. The mind gets conditioned, and that mind holds that conditioning. At the time of death, it cannot let it go. And so it comes back again, conditioned. So Vedana, together with Trishna, thirst for things, is a very powerful combination that keeps the ego complex gelled, crystallized, so that it cannot let go at the time of death or at the time of meditation. So, brain, senses, and desire we're talking about, aren't we? Also vasana, desires based on past experiences, are there. Now you're seeing a trickle-down process that's getting very heavily conditioned or modified. It's getting played with. It's getting overlaid or superimposed over. And from that standpoint, a parinama seems impossible, you see. That all of this change is not true, is not occurring to people's heads. They don't have one inkling of a thought that that's unreal out there. That's as real as it can be to them. To science, to fundamentalist religion, to mundane human convention, to societies, all of that is as real as it can be. That's my oyster. Not one idea ever occurs in their head that that might be a false superimposition. That might be an illusion. That might be a reflection only of consciousness. And I'm not seeing the real thing ever when I'm looking at it. The closest I would get to seeing the real thing is if I were ever to really develop any intelligence. See? Any real intelligence. Intelligence beyond secular knowledge that would take me to scriptural knowledge. Then I might begin to get closer to the source of consciousness. Well, guess what? We come full circle back to Gaudapada again, because there's a nice quote from him right there. So long as the upadhis are present, the jivas retain their individuation. Do you know those words? Upadhis are your body, your energy, your mind, your intelligence, things like this. As long as those sheaths, is a word that we translate upadhi into English, we say sheath, a covering. Like Sri Ramakrishna used to say, you pick a piece of grass and you pull the inside layer out the outside layer and you chew on the inside layer. Mm-hmm. You ever do that as a kid? He said that's like an upadhi. There's a sheath over another thing, you see. And the inside essence is in there. So there's an inside essence inside of all these sheaths. Our outer sheaths, our body, and pull that off, you see, and there's an inner prana, and pull that off, there's another mind in there, and pull that off, there's intelligence, you see. So, upadhis, sheaths, coverings. You have to pull them off, see through them, see them as a part of the process of transformation, which is not accurate, it's not true. You have to reverse the process. I've run the process now, I have to reverse it. I drove a car 200,000 miles, now I have to drive it in reverse. So the odometer goes backwards, you see. Whatever it takes, I have to withdraw or retract the chain of evolutes that I projected back inside of me. It's called Laya Yoga. We were talking about it today with the New Thought Church people. Laya Yoga. Laya means dissolution. If I projected it, I need to dissolve it. So, the jivas are embodied beings. So, to repeat that, so long as the upadhis are present, as long as you see these sheaths, then you, the jiva, retain your individuation. You are attached to those sheaths. If you were just associated with those sheaths, it wouldn't be so much of a problem. And actually, if you were just associated with them, you'd probably be in laukika gyan. You'd probably know the connection between yourself and the sheaths and the objects. Because your physical sheath is really not that much different than the sheath of a tree or the sheath of a body of water, you see. They're similar. They're projections. He goes on, but the Paramatman, the Supreme Self, undergoes no change due to these superimpositions. That is, when those sheaths come upon you, your Supreme Self undergoes no change whatsoever. It's taking on false superimpositions that were never really true in the first place. You're projecting them. You know our favorite old story, screen, movie, projected on it, explosions of war, tears of pathos. Go up to the screen afterwards, not a rip in the screen from the explosion. No wetness from the tears, see. The screen just simply sat there, you see, and was unaffected. The screen is Brahman, and the guy up there, you see, in the booth is your willpower. Your mind is the projector, you see. And hopefully that willpower has a little bit of intelligence in it. And the movie you projected was a good one, you see. But the important thing is the screen never underwent any change due to all the phenomena that was superimposed upon it. All the phenomena are the events of your life, your many lifetimes. Everyone's many lifetimes. That's called phenomena. Phenomenon. So yourself never undergoes any change in the midst of all that mass of phenomena that's going on. He uses an example to help you. As the clay pot is not a transformation of the unchanging akasha, space, so too the jiva is not a transformation of the immutable Paramatman, who had these changes projected upon it by ignorant minds. So, the mind did all the projecting, the self stood by, pure, perfect, unmoving, unchanging, witness, underlying substratum, unaffected, unseen seer, unstruck sound, inactive actor, inactive agent. You can find a bunch of nice appellations to assign to that unmoved mover. Now, in the remaining time in the first half, which is maybe enough just to show you what we mean, for out of all of this, then, if we see this chart on a parinama non-transformation, we can see it put here, on the left-hand side of this chart, under the Vedanta heading. On the right-hand side of the chart, I put a combination of the theory of evolution and the seven-day creation theory of the fundamentalists. So basically you could see here, what do they say? We start on the premise that existence is. Probably if you put it that simply, nobody could refute it. Because nobody's going to say, I don't exist. Everyone's going to say, I am. They're not going to say, I'm not. You can't stand there in front of them saying, I'm not an entity. Everyone can say you're an entity. What kind of entity remains to be seen, but nevertheless you're an entity. So we start on the premise that everything is. We call that everything is Brahman, Atman, consciousness, awareness, truth. Now, on one side is the principle of manifestation by unreal superimposition, right? Our quote from the last chart. The principle of manifestation by unreal superimposition, that's what Vedanta says is happening here. And on the other side is the theory of evolution by real modification, his other statement there. This was in one of his letters he wrote to some of his brother monks. So there they are, side by side. Now, Vedanta says Ajativada, non-origination. Gaudapada's Karika, which we're just reading out of that, studying it. That's the main word as far as Gaudapada is concerned. Nothing has an origin. There's no beginning, middle, and end to anything. Everything exists all the time. It's just a matter of whether it exists outwardly or inwardly. And that outwardly means manifestation, and that inwardly means non-manifestation. That outward means production, the inward means non-production. The outward means the changing object, and the inward means the eternal subject. So non-origination is what Vedanta says. Theory of origins is there, both in science and in religion. That is, dualistic religion or fundamentalist religion. The idea of origins is there. Whether it's the origin of a universe or a big bang on one side, or the origin of the soul being created out of dust or nothingness out of the other. See, so whichever way you look in science and conventional or fundamentalist religion, you find that idea of origins being real. But Vedanta is refuting it all the time. Advaita Vedanta and the non-dual schools of India are always refuting it. No, it's a Jativada. There is no origination. I dare you to find the beginning of anything and the end of anything. Because once you arrive at what you think is the end, you'll find out it has a continuation. Everything goes in cycles. Like a river, everything returns, Buddha said. And he had to sit a while to see that. Just mere 49 days or so, see, to finally trace it all back. So tracing origins is a very powerful thing. It's a very powerful way. In our tradition it's called utpatti. The teaching of Lord Vashishta. You trace origins back to, as far as you can, back inside. This is what you're doing when you connect smell to earth and water to taste, right? You're beginning to trace the origin of the 5 elements. Where do they come from? And you trace them back subtly inside you to the kingdoms of heaven within you, and you reverse the chain of cause and effect until you find the origin, the original cause, which to us would be Om, the word. Now, how about this word? We just had it, aparinama. Vedanta declares non-transformation. In other words, to put briefly, spirit projects matter. Matter is a projection of the mind. Over here, parinama, transformation, spirit becomes matter. Of course, that's only if you admit that spirit exists. Or you could say spirit is matter, or matter is spirit. That's one of the first tantric evolutes. I am the body. So that's the idea of putting spirit and matter together, whereas you can't find the differentiation between the two. It's non-discrimination. Now, these are the 2 highest of all declarations by the Advaita Vedanta. A Jativada and a Parinama. Those are the 2 great pillars on which Advaita Vedanta is built. Non-transformation, non-birth, and non-death. Those are going to be as essential to non-dualism as you can get. If you come down the ladder, cosmic materials. What about the cosmic materials? Where do they come from that project? We just said spirit projects matter. So where does it get the materials from? They're subtle and undetected. They come from unmanifested prakriti. And that's one of the great facets of the 24 cosmic principles. It's called prakriti. And it's unmanifested form. So that's something that we're missing in the West. We can't, for instance, look out on the universe and we don't have any teaching that leads us to the fact that says, oh, the tree was once unproduced. In other words, the only place we can go is that the tree started in its seed. Then where did the seed start? The seed was produced by another tree. So we get into this circular kind of reasoning. But where did the original tree or the original seed come from? Oh, it came from matter. It is matter. So we end up in matter only, in physics only. So when you want to find out the origin of the physical universe, where do you go? If you go to the Big Bang, you say, who caused the Big Bang? Or what was in the Big Bang that was so able to produce matter over time, over many billions of years, to produce planets, universe, and so forth. But Vedanta takes you in a different direction. It says nothing was ever produced. It was only drawn from something from its essential nature. And when it leaves its essential nature, it never changes its nature. That's the secret. It appears to change, but you don't want to fall into the realm of appearances. That's called Maya. Don't worry about that. Just know that the thing you're looking at is eternal, calm, is not having a problem with its projection like you are. You're the one that's having a problem, you see, with that tree and its rot, or that frog and its dissection, or that human being and its cancer. You're the one that's having the problem. Everything, the thing is in itself is calm and collected and eternal and unchanging. That's the important thing, unchanging. Cancer can't eat it away. You see. Time can't erode it. Or if you go to the Gita, as Krishna told Arjuna, a sword can't cleave it, water can't drown it, an elephant can't step on it, fire can't burn it. Go out into the battle and know that you're birthless and deathless, and so are all those other beings. Then you'll be equipped with the idea of a parinama and a jativada. There's no birth and there's no death for me, and there's no change for me either. Thank you very much. Birthless, deathless, changeless. And what about the cosmic materials? They too are that. And they come out of an unmanifested state. That's their nature. They're unproduced in their nature. When they get produced, they don't change their nature. They just appear to be different. Now I've got false superimposition to deal with, don't I? So Vedanta comes forward and says, we have a word for that, Vivarta. Or Tantra comes forward and says, we have a word for that, it's called Maya. Or Buddha comes forth and says, we have a word for that, it's called Samsara. Don't worry about it. Samsara is nirvana. So it's not like the words of the old song, something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. It's more like there's nothing happening here. And that's completely clear to me. My name is clarity. And my clarity is intense. So what about across the board? Cosmic materials are non-existent and then created out of nothing. Seems to be a problem there. See, because you can't get something out of nothing. That doesn't make sense to me. There has to be something originally in order for you to get something from it. As he just said, the clay pot's not a modification of the akasha. See, you can't get something from nothing. It's either completely one with its nature all the time, or, it's a son of a barren woman. It just doesn't make any sense. It has to make sense. It has to be practical, rational, true. It has to ring true. So this is where unmanifested prakriti becomes a great, I was going to say savior, but maybe I should say exemplar to us in this day and age, in the West, because we didn't have anything like it taught to us, that all form comes out of a formless state. And its nature is formless. We didn't have those teachings. See? We're believing in this, right? We're believing in theory of evolution by real modification. We think evolution is going on, it's going to continue going on, and things are getting modified. That means eventually things will get perfect. But is our world getting more perfect? Is it getting less polluted? Is it even changing its nature? Or does it just continue to change all the time? Maybe change is the unchanging. Change is the new unchanging, as you're beginning to say in certain circles. So then there's something suspect there. But if I look into the principle of unmanifested prakriti, then I know that I'm just drawing something out of a chest of drawers, playing with it, and when I'm through playing with it, I clean it, iron it, fold it, and put it back in that chest of drawers so it's ready for the next cycle. That's unmanifested prakriti. It'd be nice if I knew the Divine Mother who owned that chest of drawers too. See? So I know where everything comes from. Guess what? I'm free. I know where everything comes from. And because I know where everything comes from, I've also found out that the coming and going is all pure nonsense. That it never changes its nature while it appears to change. The next level, principle of thought projection is there in Vedanta. Atmik sankalpa, across the board, principle of creation. Creator fashions all out of what? Question mark. Out of dust? Are you going to take that literally? Can a soul be created at all? Much less out of mere dust. Does God breathe life into you? That's symbolic, isn't it? Can you take that literally? So where's the truth in this? See, where's the substance? The truth is that the soul is unborn. We don't talk about creation and being born in my tradition. That's the talk of addled brains. You talk about the unborn, the acreate. Vivekananda used that word. He was the first one to coin it in his letters. Acreate. God is acreate. You haven't learned that yet in the West yet, have you? He said. It's never created. And not only is it never created, it never creates. So I was telling them at the New Thought Church this morning. You see, God is not the cause of anything. Mind-ego complex could be a cause. The word might be a cause. See, down here, the sperm getting together with the ovum might be a cause. See, but that's the physical cause alone. We're going to have to trace that through origins to find out that everything is originless. How many births and deaths do I have to have? How many sets of parents do I have to have before I know that all of that is non-actual? That I've been here the whole time, as my bodies have been being born and dying, that I've been looking on as witness to all of that forever. And it'll only stop when I decide to withdraw the dream. Isn't that what Gaudapada just said? Runner running a race in a dream. He finally realizes that he's the dreamer, and he has to wake up. Well, that's called enlightenment. We just defined it. It's knowing that time, space, living beings in the world are all Brahman. Quit asking the question, what is enlightenment? Shankara answered it back in 700 AD, and I'm sure it was answered long before him. All of this is Brahman. That's enlightenment. But you must be constantly aware of it. You must keep it in mind. We have done the first half of this chart. We have 5 minutes left. Let's see how much more we can accomplish. The next item on the list is unmanifested prakriti projected by Mahat appears as manifest nature on the Vedantic side. On the other side, nature is incepted from the void and formed by physical force. I don't really know how else to say it. That a Big Bang could produce matter, or maybe a black hole sucks matter in and spits it back out. See, it's physical alone, isn't it? It's physical only. What happened before the physical universe? What about all the other worlds? What about the kingdoms of heaven within you? What about those worlds? What's the Big Bang equivalent to there? So unmanifested prakriti, that is, everything held in abeyance back inside of you, projects the world through the cosmic mind. It's a projection, like a movie on a screen. And beings who meditate sit and just notice that, you see. They see it all as a projection. I can't tell you how many times I've come upon that statement about all of life and mind, all of the worlds and universes being a projection of the mind, in so many different traditions in the East. It's just as if it's totally accepted there without any argument. They don't even argue amongst themselves, amongst the different sampradayas and different darshanas. Oh yeah, that's a given. They accepted it long ago. Something we need to do. Well, the next one's easy. Consciousness assumes forms, but souls are created from matter. It's the opposing view. Really? You can get a soul from matter? Or is it the other way around? Maybe matter comes from the soul. Or at least from the mind. The soul probably doesn't have anything to do with either of them. It just exists. It's a parinami. It's a jativada. The soul with a capital S. It doesn't participate in the drama, you see, in the play of dualities. It remains pure and perfect in its own pristine state, calm, collective, naturally so. Nirvanic so, as Gaudapada says. So, which would you choose? No brainer. In Vedanta, consciousness assumes form. That is, Brahman has become all this, as I just said. How did it do it? By Chittabhasa, by a trickle-down process. Did it take 4,320,000,000 years to do so? Or did it all happen in a flash? Or is it all happening all the time, in and out? And since it's so much there in my face all the time, I can't even see it. The constancy of consciousness. The actuality of awareness is there so much all the time that we've just gotten sort of blindsided by it, sort of used to it. We got used to our own true nature, being pure and perfect. And now we just project outward into the world of imperfection. And turning within and gazing at the original face is the rare move of an enlightened soul. Enough of this nonsense, you see. I think I will just return to the original. So, the pick between consciousness assumed forms and consciousness are created from matter is not a hard one for the practical and rational person. Now we've run out of time in our first half, so we're going to take a 15-minute break. You may, at home, if you're live streaming, take a look at this chart, these two charts closer for a few minutes while we take our break here in Hawaii, and we will return in 15 minutes. Namaste. Om Tat Nayo. Om Tat Nayo Ravrinni Mahe Gatung Yagyaya Gatung Ye Nupataye Daivi Swastarastu Naha Swastir Manusebhyaha Urdhvam Jigatu Bhesajam Sangno Astu Dvipade Sang Chatushpate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we offer all into the Great Self. May we always delight in this offering. May we always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. May divine blessings be upon us. May peace be unto the entire human race. May healing, well-being, and prosperity then also abide among us. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.
Katihina jani tumi rakshaka hai, chita shanchita banchita bhakti dane, Guru Deva daya karadina jane. Tava nama shada shuva sadhaka hai, Pandita dhamma manava pavaka hai, Mahima tava gochara shuddha mane, Guru Deva daya karadina jane. Jaya Sadguru Ishvara Prabhaka hai, Bhavaroga Vikara Vinashaka hai, Mana Jaina Rahitava Shri Charane, Gurudeva daya kara dina jane. Jaya Sadguru Ishvara Prabhaka He, Bhavaroga Vikara Vinashaka He, Mana Jena Rahitava Shri Charane, Gurudeva daya kara dina jane. Gurudeva daya kara dina jane.